I'm Wayne Epps here with Zach Joaquin. Welcome to Ram Talk with the RTD, a weekly VCU basketball podcast talking all things VCU hoops. VCU at this point in the season is getting ready for the backstretch of the regular season schedule. 5 games to go. So today we're going to kind of break down how the season has gone to this point, look back at Tuesday's game at Fordham, and ahead at a big game on Friday at the Eagle Center against Richmond. Zach, heading into this year, there's a ton of questions about this group. Bones Highland was drafted. Jameer Watkins, unfortunately, tore ACL in preseason practice. So it's kind of, what is this group going to be? Ace Baldwin also was out, tore an Achilles in late May. And he was kind of going to be that leader coming into the season with the guys who were lost. But then you didn't have him either. So it was like, what are we going to see here? And so I think the group that did come back, the group that was healthy, did a good job of kind of holding things steady until Ace got back. Obviously Vince Williams as a senior, kind of took things on his shoulders. I feel like he had always been sort of a Robin to, his teammates Batman. Earlier in his career, he kind of took more of things on his shoulders.
Put the cape on this year for sure.
Exactly, and Jay Nunn stepping in for Ace at point guard, played really really well. 9.4 points per game, 2.1 steals per game in the 8 games before Ace came back. Really did a good job there. I think VCU, similar to their play out in South Dakota last year, this year going down to the battle for Atlantis, I think they got a lot of confidence by how they played against some big-time teams there. Yeah. Obviously beat Syracuse, they played Baylor really well, played UConn really well, and realistically, had a chance to win both of those games. And, I think back to Baylor's Matthew Mayer after the game against VCU. He was like, VCU, they're some dogs. Like, they play really hard.
It means a lot coming from Baylor, too. That's exactly. A tough team.
Yeah, I think they also have that mentality. And obviously defending national champions. So, like you said, that speaks volumes. So, they finished off strong, obviously getting Ace back late in A-10 play. It was kind of, I guess you could say, a haggard or into the schedule as they couldn't really foresee because the last couple of games were canceled, including Penn State because of COVID issues. But still coming back from Bahamas, finished off pretty strong to put themselves in a pretty good place heading to 18 play.
A couple out-of-conference losses that you look down at the schedule and you kind of balk at, Chattanooga and Wagner. But like you were saying, both of those teams have played quite well in conference, and so those losses don't necessarily look as bad as they might have at the beginning of the year, right?
Exactly. So, again, they kind of heading into 18 play, no real bad losses, but also no real standout wins. Like obviously the Vanderbilt win was big, the Syracuse win was big.
Your best wins are losses, right? It was Baylor and UConn. Essentially, those are kind of the most impressive product that they put on the court in non-conference play, and I'm not sure how much a committee will choose to give them points, for good losses. But it definitely showed the ceiling that this team can play with anyone in the country when they're right.
Yeah, exactly. I remember, after that weekend, or after that week, Thanksgiving week in Battle for Atlantis, I saw all these tweets, analysts, John Rothstein and others were saying, nobody in the country plays harder than VCU. And like you said, I think that could be something that sends out to the committee that say, hey, these guys can go toe-to-toe with some top competition. So that can help them, come next month. So
got a lot of respect from national media being on a national stage there in a holiday tournament, Thanksgiving tournament, to be able to show that ceiling. It was a great stage to be able to put that on. What was this team picked to finish in the conference coming into the year? Because they've most certainly exceeded expectations, right?
I think so. Picked to finish 4th.
So right about there.
Yeah. So I guess they were picked to get that coveted double bye, but at the same time, not picked to be up where they want to be. Just usually top 1, at least top 2 in the
They're
league.
up to where are they in the conference now? Second or third after the win last night? Okay.
Second, yeah, they're 10-3. So yeah, like you said, they are performing above expectations to this point. So heading to 18 play, going back to January 5th at Dayton, that was just kind of weird. Just again, they were off for 3 weeks because of COVID. You didn't know who's going to be back playing because some guys were still dealing with it. Ended up being Levi Stocker III was still out for a couple more games, but and also Jay Nunn missed that 18 opener as well. But the overall played pretty well. Ace hit a 3 to win that game, and they kind of got going from there. And obviously had a couple dips as far as the loss to St. Bonaventure, 30-point loss to Dayton at home, which kind of maybe an anomaly. But other than that, after the win at Fordham last night, they held on in the second half. They won 7 out of their last 8, 4 straight overall. They're 8-1 on the road overall.
Road Warriors this year.
100%. Or Roads Warriors, however you want to say.
Okay, I like that.
but I think the big thing is the defense, which really kind of I think they kind of proved how good the defense was in Battle for Atlantis. the defense has stayed pretty consistent, but with it, the offense is coming along a lot.
And what's the adage? Defense travels, right? That's part of why they've been so good on the road.
Exactly, and I think the defense was kind of carrying things because the offense was like so bad for much of the year. You go back to A-10 play, they're shooting about 41% from the field mid-December, which was 11th in the league. Now, even after a rough, second half at Fordham last night, they're shooting 47.2%, which is leading the league.
The Mason game helped out a lot, right?
Yeah, scoring 85 points and shooting about 55%. And that game on Saturday was a big piece of that. But I think just the offense catching up a little bit to the defense has helped them kind of now seem like they're in a pretty good groove at this point.
And that's not surprising. We've seen that year in and year out from VCU, right? The offense sometimes can take much of the season to catch up to the defense, but when it does, you see that really high ceiling come through. And when they're shooting the ball well, like in that Mason game, and like we've seen early in the non-conference play, they can play with anyone in the country. It's just that they also seem to have a pretty low floor, like in the Dayton loss, like in the Bonaventure loss, that when they're not hitting, it can kind of all fall apart.
Yeah, exactly. And I think maybe could get even more grace this year because, again, Jimmy Watkins was expected to be a pretty good offensive piece heading into this year.
Jaron McAllister was going to contribute too, right?
Exactly. He's a tough scorer at the rim. And his freshman year, he had a pretty good into his freshman year when he was healthy. And unfortunately now missing a second straight season. So he could have been a nice key cog in that rotation as well. And then Bones Highland, anytime you have a guy who averages 19.5 points a game, like he carried so much of the offensive burden last year, you're going to have to figure out some things this year. And I think Vince has kind of found that balance of, okay, he can distribute the ball, be the offensive glue guy, but also he can go score when needed. And now KeShawn is like playing out of his mind the last few games as well, which, guys, he's averaged, single digits in scoring throughout his career. Now in double figures, like the last 4 games.
What did Rhodes say last night? We don't win that game without KeShawn, right? He took the onus when they needed a bucket late, when things were ugly. You said Fordham mucked it up in the second half, as they do really well. A lot of respect for that program. They were tough in the second half and got under VCU's skin a little bit with the technicals in the first. And you could see the game kind of get ugly like Fordham wanted it to. And when VCU needed some control on offense, KeShawn was the guy that took that on his shoulders. And so it's really been Ace, Vince, and KeShawn, right? I mean, this is an incredibly deep team rotation-wise, but it's really not as far as creators and offensive initiators and guys who you want the ball in their hands late in games. It's Vince, Ace, and KeShawn, right? It's it seemed like down the stretch, it was always one of those 3 guys initiating the offense, but they were great last night, particularly KeShawn.
Yeah. And he kind of took things on his own shoulders the last 6.5 minutes.
Gets downhill, man. He's such a tough driver.
Yeah. He's so explosive, but like you say, he plays with no fear. It seems like, and I really showed with him just like willing to go draw contact last night, get himself on the line, and
7 of 8, you said, from the line down the stretch. Right?
Which was huge. So before we get too ahead of ourselves, again, they're the 10-3 in conference, tied for second place. They got five games to go.
Davidson win is huge. Team leading the conference.
100%. And Davidson was 25th in the country at the time, had won 13 in a row. So that's a big win for the resume too. A quad 1 win. That was a huge one. And again, having won 4 straight now, they put themselves in pretty good position to, at the very least, get that, double bye heading into the tournament, top 4 seed, but also continue to try to bulk up their resume and maybe put themselves in that large conversation.
And some opportunity down the stretch, some tough tests, but also some opportunity to enhance the resume. St. Louis, Bonaventure, can't lose that UMass game, but you get Mason again. So there's opportunity for them to boost it, and if they can keep this momentum going into the A-10 tournament, man, that A-10 tournament every year, it feels like about half the league has a chance to really make some noise in it. And VCU is certainly going to be up there. If they can get that double bye, they'll be in a good position to make some noise in the A-10 tournament. And they will probably need to win the A-10 tournament to get into the NCAA tournament. It might still be a little early to say that. If they can keep this momentum going and win out in the regular season and get to an A-10 championship game, then maybe they could sneak onto the at-large spot, but it would be tough. They probably need to win the A-10 tournament to get into the NCAA tournament right now.
I think so too. They're on a very, very fringe outskirts of the bubble competition
next
right now.
4 out or something like that.
Or maybe next. But, at the same time, they're still kind of in the picture. So like you say, if they're able to win out and, finishing the season, they play St. Bonaventure, they play at St. Louis, which will be a big game as well. Those two could be huge in boosting that at-large conversation if they avoid any other losses before then. And like you said, if they can make the A-10 final, then maybe you're talking about next 4 out at least, and kind of at least in that conversation. So we'll see. But like you said, I think most realistic possibility is winning the
Yeah.
A10 tournament, getting that automatic bid.
Since we're doing the show so late into the season, there's so much that we could touch on, but I wanted to make sure and say that Bones has been so much fun to watch in the NBA. I wrote that down when we touched on him a little bit ago, and we just needed to throw that out there because it's been awesome to see him immediately come in and contribute on a playoff team.
Yeah.
In Denver, that's been awesome, and everyone felt like his game was so NBA ready, and that's very much proven to be true. And it's huge for the program. I mean, obviously, it was kind of sad when he left because you don't want to see such a great player go, especially not being able to compete in the NCAA tournament last year. To not be able to see him, kind of go out fighting was tough. But man, it's been awesome to watch him in the NBA this year, and it's so huge for VCU from a recruiting standpoint for it to have a player immediately go to the NBA and contribute. That's going to be a boon for them for years to come when they're trying to get top prospects.
100%. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, it's been so fun to watch. Like we saw that his ball handling, how it created opportunities for him last year, being able to kind of hit that step back
The
three.
range.
Yeah, so much range. But I think one thing that was maybe underrated because he's so good, such a good 3-point shooter, was his layup package. And there's a lot of questions. Like he has a nickname Bones for a reason. He's a skinny guy. He's a small guy.
With the length.
Yeah, and I think he's made up for his maybe lack of physical tools with his ball handling because he's able to get by guys without having to body up.
Incredibly elusive.
Just by his ability to kind of put the ball on a string. We saw the highlight last week. He kind of crossed up Kemba Walker, and Kemba Walker went sliding, and he kind of did the little hesitation, waited for a second, hit the three, and then, that was disrespectful in itself. then he pointed at him too, and it went back up the court. So
He's always had that edge, though.
Oh, yeah.
It's not surprising to see if you're a VCU fan, right?
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, like you said, it's cool to see him playing the way he is. Right off the bat, a big time piece for Denver. So that's been cool.
And there have been a few guys that, as we were talking about getting back to VCU this season, that have stepped up in that place as the offensive initiator. It's really been Ace and Vince. Vince, man, I don't remember the last time VCU had a really true point forward like this. I can't think of another name in recent VCU memory that really compares to a guy that it seems like with the lineups that VCU is playing, he's the 4, but he's bringing the ball up a lot of the time, and he's the guy initiating the offense, and that's been striking to see. I don't remember in recent VCU memory them having a guy like that.
No. I guess physically the closest you can say is like Trevion Graham. They're both like 6'6", a little over 200 pounds. Trevion was a little bit bigger, but there hasn't been a guy like that who because just Vince's ball handling ability. He could be the point guard if needed, if it came to
Essentially
that.
is sometimes.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So, but then also the rebounding. He's a big time assist guy as well. His first game back, last week against Rhode Island, coming off missing a couple of games with a calf injury. He had 7 assists, which is one side shy of his career high right off the back after missing 2 games.
He's got to lead the nation in drawn charges as well, right?
I really wish that was a stat.
I wish it was too, because I swear he'd lead the country in it.
Yeah, KenPom has the foul drawn per 40 minutes stat, but they don't break it out unfortunately to charges. But I think he would be up there.
He's got to be up there.
Yeah. So he's been fun to watch, and he also has had some big time moments where he stepped up in big situations, like the previous Richmond game. We hit the late 3 there. He's kind of at moments just like KeShawn did last night, kind of put the team on his back when needed. So
he's had that edge a little bit too.
Yeah.
We saw that spill over maybe a little bit in the Fordham game last night. He was the second technical, I think, right? And so, but I'm frankly okay with that sometimes because I love the intensity, and because if you're gonna play like VCU, then it feels like sometimes like there's the negative externalities, or you might get into foul trouble, and maybe you might get teed up sometimes. But I don't know. With Bones leaving, I love that Vince has kind of stepped into that. That spirit leader role, where he's kind of the mentality that everyone feeds off of him. They really missed him when he was out with the calf injury for a little bit.
Yeah. You saw his value, and that was, obviously one of those games was the Dayton loss, the 30-point loss. So games like that, you definitely see his value because it's not just the stats, even though he's leading the team in rebounds, leading the team in scoring. It's just, I think, as a floor leader, he's key. So he definitely was missed. I guess with that, we'll kind of get into. We had some little season superlatives we wanted to get into.
Yeah, sorry, we got a little tangential here, guys. There's a lot to talk about when we're jumping in this late in the season. We didn't really know where to start here.
Yeah, but I think that carries us right into if we want to go with MVP. I think we're both.
Yeah.
Both. It's pretty easy pick. Is Vince right there? Just again, leading the team in scoring, 13.1 points per game, leading team with 6 rebounds per game as well. He's right up there with Ace as far as assists. He's playing 31.7 points or minutes per game. Just every category you can think of, he's putting in big time contribution.
For a VCU team that rotates as much as Mike likes to, that's a lot of minutes per game for Vince to be playing.
Yeah. So, again, it's a guy who always played like a supporting role early in his career. To see him step into that sort of leading role, first team All A10 caliber play, I think has been huge for VCU this year. So he's the easy MVP.
That was going to be my question. Is he in what does the conversation for Conference Player of the Year look like right now, and is he in it?
Before it should be, I think you could say Joshua Durga in that conversation. Okay. Just some of the numbers he's putting up.
Because it seems like Davidson has kind of been a sum of the parts team a little bit, right? So I'm not sure there's a guy that really stands out that you say he's the front runner off of the team that's leading the conference right now.
Exactly. I think Luka could be in that conversation too, but I think just Vince, he does so much across the board, and VCU has shared the scoring load so much. Like, even though he is leading VCU in those categories, the numbers don't really jump off the page. So I think that could hurt him in Player of the Year sort of voting. But I think he should be a shoe-in for obviously conference first team for sure. Like that would be a colossal upset if he's not on first team. I think just what he's meant to this team, and VCU obviously looking like it's going to be in the top 4 heading into the A10 tournament.
Honorable mentions would be KeShawn, Hason, and Ace. Yeah, I think that Vince is the clear choice, but those are the other guys that come to mind, right?
Yeah, definitely.
We have other superlatives for them.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll go with most surprising, which for mine that was KeShawn, just because again, he hadn't put up huge scoring numbers earlier in his career. Averages just about a little over 5 points per game last season in 16 games. That season was cut short last year, but to now, over his last few games, been averaging 18 points at career high, 28 against Rhode Island, including 21 in the first half. And they had 21 last night against Fordham, including 13 in the last 6.5 minutes. Like, he's just been going off these last few games. And he talked about it, recently, just like he wants to kind of leave a mark as a senior in these last several games at VCU, and he wants to be kind of remembered for his play. And so he's kind of trying to do that now in these last several games.
And Mike did as well, right? I remember when you asked Rhodes about that senior urgency, that he's got that urgency, and which perhaps makes you wonder about whether he's going to use the extra year of eligibility. That's a few questions. I know it's something that you've talked about, hopefully writing about in the future. There's a few question marks on the roster going into next year like that, but we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. Man, KeShawn, it's been what Mike said last night. We don't win that game without him, right? And because he very much took the onus down the stretch there, and has been one of the most important players on the team. I guess it feels almost wrong to say most surprising, because I think we all hoped that KeShawn was going to take this next step from an offensive output this year, but he has done it with flying colors. And so been awesome to see him take that next step in some of his last opportunities to do so in a VCU uniform. X factor. Yeah,
I would say that'd be Marcus Shahonis for me, because he was a guy that came out, obviously transferred from Washington, trying to fit into a system.
Best hair too, I think we were saying the other day, right?
Easily. But he was coming from. So I think the defensively was the biggest transition for him, because Syracuse plays a 2-3 zone. Mike Hopkins was a former Syracuse assistant, and he kind of brought a zone to Washington. So he was playing that zone. He had to come to VCU and learn how to play man-to-man, pressing every possession. The point guard at the top of the zone, or top of the VCU press, is arguably the most important piece.
Particularly missed an ace earlier in the year too. He was huge.
Exactly. So I think he had a little bit slow start to the year. He also was battling a groin injury earlier in the year too, which I think hindered him, particularly as a 3-point shooter. You need your lower body to get that lift on the shot. So I think that might have hurt him a little bit earlier in the year too. So he had a slow start, but again, like you mentioned, he had to play a lot of point guard minutes with Ace out. So the rotation was like Jaden and Marcus at point guard with Ace out. Since Ace has come back, they've been able to move Marcus to his more natural, 2-guard position, more off the ball. He's played almost exclusively off the ball since Ace has come back, and I think that's allowed him to find his shot and really be that scorer that he showed he could be at Washington, and which is probably a big reason why they wanted to go after him in the first place. And in the A10 play, he's shooting 42.1% from 3. And he's had some pretty good scoring outings here, particularly in January.
You probably like to see him get a little more volume, right? And from a scoring, it seems like he can disappear a little bit in some games. And I think that because the rotation is so deep and because it's a transfer, maybe he's not yet to the point confidence wise where he's really comfortable saying, no, I need to demand the ball in key situations, but it feels like there's a higher offensive ceiling there, right, that he's shown. And so maybe you'd almost like to see him get more shots up.
Yeah, I agree. Kind of weirdly, like the way at Washington, one thing he struggled with getting consistent playing time at times at Washington. And here it's been kind of the same, which again, sometimes it's tough because of the rotation being so deep. And, with Ace being healthy, you can play Ace and Jaden in the starting backcourt, which is what they've done recently. And so, Marcus's minutes has been a little bit up and down this year as well. So like you said, it can be tough to get into a rhythm, particularly as a shooter when your minutes aren't always consistent. So that's been an interesting sort of thing thrown into his production. But when he has gotten pretty good minutes, those games he's gotten high, it's been high, and he's been playing really well.
Speaking of Jaden, that backcourt's been a little crowded. It's been tough to get in because Jaden's been putting in some really good minutes too. And we had another superlative for him as next up, or kind of most exciting, young gun who's come onto the scene. And man, his offensive game, there's so much promise. There's so much ceiling. You were talking about, reminds you of Marcus Evans a little bit with the mid-range game, with the ability to create off the dribble. It feels like in the next few years, he's going to take on a gradually increasing volume scoring role for VCU because he's got a high offensive ceiling.
Very high, yeah. I don't know how they find these guys, but like they've gotten some point guards who have been able to play really confidently as freshmen, which what freshman point guard has to have is confidence. So you go back to Bones a couple of years ago, he had to play point guard, particularly with Marcus his senior year. Was dealing with a lot of injuries that 1920 season, and Bones had to play more and more minutes over the course of the year as a freshman. At
Makes
point
you grow
guard.
up fast.
Yeah, and then the next year they get Bones as a freshman, and they were able to move Ace as a freshman. We were able to move Bones to an off the ball position, and Ace was starting at point guard last season,
which took a lot of pressure off Bones.
Yeah, exactly. But Ace also, like Bones did the previous year, played very confidently there, which helped VCU a lot.
Trial by fire a little bit, and it pays off in the years to come when you get that much experience as a freshman.
Yeah, which like you mentioned, like that's kind of been a saying that Mike Rhodes has said, like we're gonna throw him in the fire, like which is what you kind of need. You need that game experience to get better. So these point guards have had it, and so now you fast forward to this year, like Jay Nunn's, starting at point guard as a freshman, like he also had some, a little bit of shakiness at times early in the year, but, I mentioned his numbers earlier when Ace was out. But now you can see that offensive game, he's just very confident. I remember one shot that really sticks out in my mind was he hit a step back three at Davidson in that win right before at halftime, which looked like one of the step back threes that Bones was hitting last year. And then like you mentioned too, I really love his mid-range game. He looks a lot like Marcus Evans, just some of those fadeaways and pull-up free throw line jumpers he's able to hit. That's a big thing too. So
we were saying earlier, like one of those players where sometimes when he's getting the shot off, you're going, no, that's not the shot that we're looking for here. But he's got that creativity that it goes in, and then you're like, okay, well that's just how we drew it up, right? And he was bringing the ball up late in that Fordham game last night. I know it's Fordham and it's a bottom of the conference team, but that's still a close road conference game. Late in the year, you got a freshman bringing the ball up. That's a lot of confidence that Mike Rhodes has shown in Jaden Nunn early on.
Yeah, definitely. And, noticing recently, it seemed like he had the ball in his hands even more, even with Ace in the game. It seemed like Ace been playing a little bit more off the ball at times when he's in the game. So that's that trust right there. And you go back to, we're going to talk more about this in a minute, but the previous Richmond game back on January 29th, Ace fouled out with like 5 minutes or so to go in the game. And so that meant Jaden had to do more ball handling or more point guard duties late in that game. And that was big because obviously that was a close game too. Vince ended up hitting the three to win that one. But Jaden having to control the ball there, he did it well to help VCU win a close game there. So he's definitely next up.
Absolutely. And exciting for years to come, like we talked about, to see him get that experience as a freshman. You've got to think that's going to pay off down the road in his career.
Yeah, 100%. So we talked about it a lot. We'll quickly touch back on this last night's game at Fordham. It was one of the biggest sports cliches. It was truly a tale of two halves. VCU 69% from the field in the first half. That was even with 12 turnovers. Like, how does that happen? I don't know even how that's mathematically possible. But they were up 17. It was like a minute and a half to go. It just had a huge lead. It seemed like the game was in hand.
It checked out a little bit.
Yeah. And they come out. One thing they really did well too was smother Chuba Ohams, which they had one of Fordham's leading scorer, Darius Quisenberry, was out for a second straight game with a knee injury. Chuba Ohams is averaging a double-double, so he was kind of their leading average producer.
Did not have much space to operate on the block.
Not at all. think he was 0 for 4 from the field in the first half, had 5 turnovers personally in the first half, just 1 point at the free throw line that first half, and that helped VCU build that big lead. And Chuba's 5 turnovers were part of 15 total Fordham turnovers, and they were just averaging like 12.8 per game heading in. They passed their game average in the first half alone. That was wild.
It felt like they passed it in those first 5 minutes or so.
It did. I remember the announcer was talking a lot about slippery floor or whatever that was going on with that.
Yeah, there were a few falls, weren't there?
Yeah.
Maybe that contributed to the turnover numbers.
Travels, yeah. But still, VCU kind of dominated, even though they had their own turnover struggles in the first half. Come on, second half, and like you mentioned, Rose just said they kind of mucked up the game. We're throwing out some different defenses, including like some zone looks.
I thought a 1-2-2, and then on the broadcast they said a matchup zone.
Yeah.
It looked like some sort of amorphous thing that I wasn't sure how to define.
Amorphous is the perfect word for that, but VC couldn't figure it out. So
yeah, VC couldn't figure it out. It seemed like none of us could figure it out.
So yeah, they had like a 4.5 minute field goal drought. About midway through the second half, and beat Fordham went on a 7-0 run during that spurt, to really kind of cut into that lead. Vince Williams hit a couple free throws to stop that scoring drought, but then Fordham went on another 7-0 run to cut the lead to 3. So it was like,
it got hairy there in the second half.
Very hairy. And so VCU just was like, tonight they could not make a basket. They ended up, shooting just 30.8% from the field in the second half, but there just had a couple extended field goal droughts there. But then, it was a 3-point game with about 6.5 minutes to go. KeShawn Curry just really took matters into his own hands. He scored a layup with like 6:37 to go to kind of fend Fordham off a little bit, give him some more breathing room after it was a 3-point game.
High off the glass is beautiful touch on that shot.
Yeah, that was beautiful. He kind of found himself on Chuba Ohans on that possession, which was an obvious mismatch, and he kind of like toyed with him a little bit and then just like blew past him for that nice little finger roll. So that was a nice play. And then as you mentioned earlier, from there on out, he just was being very, very aggressive, getting to the rim. He was like, I'm either going to score or I'm going to draw a foul.
7 of 8 from the line.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And then he had another late layup and a dunk late as well. Also, I want to mention too, Vince had a big time 3 in those closing minutes as well to help them as well. So it's kind of the KeShawn show, but featuring Vince in those final 6.5 minutes.
Vince has hit some huge threes. You talked about the Richmond game this year. It seems like when they need a decisive bucket late in the game, that he is very comfortable taking on that responsibility. And he's been huge late in games this year.
Yeah, very huge. They squeezed it out. Again, it was a 4th straight win, through to 81 on the road, which is their best road start in 9 years. so
defense travels.
Yeah, 100%. So.
Fordham 4 of 24 from 3, right? That was part of we've talked about that low offensive ceiling for VCU, and it was very, very much reared its ugly head in that second half. But when you're so good defending on the perimeter, other teams, there's not much. Your broadcasters use the word spurtability, which is definitely not a real word. But when you defend the 3-point line that well, you really limit the opposition's spurtability, right? You can't get on those runs that really close that gap. And in that second half, regardless of how much VCU was struggling offensively, the defense was still so good that Fordham could never really put together that decisive foot on the gas run that they needed to truly get back in the game. Even though it got down to 3, it felt nervous for VCU, but it never felt like, okay, Fordham's like fully recovered from that first half. It seemed like VCU kind of always kept them at arm's length, even though 3 points doesn't really feel like arm's length.
Yeah.
But it felt like VCU was always in the driver's seat, regardless of how close it got. And it's the defensive backbone that was the reason for that.
Yeah, 100%. And, VCU, for a time earlier in the season, they were leading the country in 3-point defense. And now they're still 4th in the country, holding teams at 27.1%, which is crazy from 3.
And then I think in the game notes that they had on the broadcast before going into the game, they were 2nd in the country in turnover percentage. So when you're not letting opposing teams hit threes, and when you're creating turnovers at a high clip, then that's a good recipe for success, even when you're not clicking offensively, because the other team can't put together the runs, and you get some easy baskets off the turnovers.
Yeah. And that's a good point too, because VCU, that's been part of their identity for years now. It's like, we're going to score off of turnovers, score off of our defense. Maybe they relied on that too much sometimes when at times this year they've struggled to operate in the half court. But like you say, even when you have those offensive struggles, when you're able to create opportunities off your defense, and that can at least keep you in it. So
and breaks runs.
Yeah.
It seemed that happened a few times last night when Fordham was starting to put something together, went on I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but they had a few 8-2, 7-3, little small runs like that, but they were never really able to make it a decisive double-digit run, in part because VCU has that defensive backbone to lean on, and that KeShawn and that are the reason that they won the game and were able to hold on in that second half.
100%. So yeah, again, after that, sitting there at 10-3 in conference play, I asked Mike Rose this question earlier this week. Like, it seems almost not to underestimate them, but almost wild to think back to where they were at the beginning of the season. Just again, all the questions there were with Ace being out, Jameer Watkins being out, just all these question marks. Like, for them still to be 10-3 in conference, like you have to be pretty satisfied with that.
And speaking of which, Ace, did he really play 40 minutes?
Yeah,
last night. That's incredible for a guy coming off an Achilles. I mean, they were saying it on the broadcast too. He's not, inching back or trying to get back in any sense of it at this point. He is 100%, and that is amazing with his recovery timetable for him to be playing 40 minutes right now.
Yeah, he played 40 at George Mason too. so that's pretty wild. But
we're bringing the ball up as much as he does too. That's incredibly impressive. It seems like he's got a ridiculously high motor, and it seems like the gas tank never really runs out.
Yeah, 100%. Which, like you said, come back from injury, that's super encouraging. Marcus has talked a lot about, you win when you win one game, the next one becomes that much bigger. The Richmond game is always a big one.
Can Richmond ever be any bigger?
Yeah, and I guess I'll throw it out another cliche as, they always say you can throw out all the records and the stats when you head into a Richmond game.
Yeah.
And, Richmond's had a solid season as well, of course, sitting there at 8-5 in conference. But, and the last one was a battle. That was a great environment there on the 29th. Obviously, close game. Richmond drew up a great play at the end. Got a look from Andre Gustafson.
Too good of a look.
Yeah, got a great look there at the end that could have at least tied the game there at the very end. But ended up Vince on one of the last possessions, the ball got knocked loose. He ran it down, and he just walked the ball back up the court. Didn't pass anything, just right up the top of the key, knocked down a three.
Knew he was. You looked like you could see it in his eyes. He knew he was taking it the whole time.
Yeah, he turned around just like flexing. It's like that shout, like that you could kind of tell the emotion of that shot, and then they end up holding on for that 64-62 win.
He knows the moment. Yeah. He's really good at feeling the moment in games and late in close games, especially a rivalry game like that.
Yeah.
That gives you so much confidence, the rest of the team, to be able to see your talisman. Just have that look in his eyes, even though that seems kind of inexact. You can tell. And he's been that guy for them late in games this year, and the rest of the team has so much confidence in him.
Yeah, I agree. Which, like I said, that's what was missed in the game like that. Dayton lost. So, he's obviously going to play an important role now in this rematch on Friday night at the Siegel Center. We touched on that January 29th game. I think one thing that VCU did pretty well in that game as well was defend the three. Which that's been a rinse and repeat thing this year. But Richmond makes about 8.7 threes per game. So defending that three well against them is that much important, that much more important, particularly in a 2-point game.
Particularly at the Robbins Center, it was huge to not let them get the crowd behind them and get momentum going. Kind of kept it low scoring, and they weren't able to put together those big runs.
Yeah, and Richmond, like they have been over the years, they're very good at taking care of the ball. Led by the sure-handed Jacob Gilliard. That press doesn't really affect them as much, but VCU's always going to try. So I think that's always going to be one of the keys to the game.
He's a tough player to dislike.
he's a fun player to watch.
He is, yeah. A lot of respect for him.
He had that game-winning three against Mason a few games ago, or last week. That feels like a few games ago because they played Mason 2 times in 3 days.
Which was really weird.
Yeah.
one of those postponed from earlier in the year from COVID? Okay.
Yeah, so there was a little NBA back-to-back there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a great player, fun to watch. And like I say, as a senior now, at this point in his career, like he knows how to deal with the VCU press.
Yeah.
But VCU is always going to try to disrupt Richmond and get them out of rhythm in that way. So that's going to be obviously one of the keys to the game in this rematch, as we'll continue to defend the three well as always trying to keep Grant Golden from going off inside. And this year has been Tyler Burton, who's put up some big numbers. And that was one of the standouts of the previous Richmond game as well. KeShawn Curry on Tyler Burton. He really defended him well. He held Tyler Burton at 1 of 12 from the field. Richmond's leading scorer in that previous Richmond matchup. So
he's a crazy athlete.
Yeah, crazy athlete. Long. So can score pretty much anywhere on the floor. So it's hard to ask for repeat 1 for 12 defensive performances, but I think KeShawn's defense on him will be huge again in his rematch on Friday.
And you talk about Golden, that makes me think of a point from the Fordham game that we haven't really touched on much is Hason Ward. It's an ankle. We're not exactly sure where he's at as far as prospectively being able to play Friday.
Yeah.
VCU's deep down, though. That's something that you've written about. Mike Hill will have to step up. Jalen will have to step up. Obviously, Levi will have to step up if he's not there. But something that it seemed like late in that Fordham game, early on in the first half, Hason had a few buckets down low where he used his length. And it looks like he has those. It's not like a mid-range. It's kind of a turnaround post bucket, but because he's so long, he can shoot it from kind of far out. And it just looks impossible to contest with his length. It looks like nobody can really get a hand up, and he's just able to shoot over anybody down there. Yeah. And on the flip side, on the defensive side, it looks like he can challenge any one shot. He's such a great rim protector. And against Golden on Friday, if they're missing Hason, you would think that puts... It's going to be a big ask of the other three bigs to step up, particularly defensively on Golden down low.
That would be a huge loss. After the Mason game this past Saturday, that was a 6 win in 7 games. And I asked after post game just like what goes into that. And one of the first things Mike Rose said was a consistent Hason Ward, because he also has been playing just like KeShawn, sort of out of his mind recently. He's been averaging 11.6 points and 8.8 rebounds heading into the Fordham game. And he started the Fordham game 3 for 3. From the field for 6 points in like the first 7 minutes.
They had no answer for him early on down low.
Yeah. And just like one of the weird like twists that he got injured on a play he scored on.
Thankfully not a knee. Yeah. It looked like a non-contact thing. It looked like it could have been a knee at first, but it's an ankle. And he came back to the bench. He was sitting on the bench for the rest of the game. So seemingly not catastrophic. Thankfully, just, hoping the best for him. If he's not able to play Friday, hopefully it's not a long-term thing.
Yeah, definitely. So that would be a big question mark. Hopefully maybe get a little update on him tomorrow before Friday, just to see where he might be at.
Would Levi start in his place, presumably?
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I would say Levi would start. But they could throw a wild card and put Jalen Delogin, but I think it'll be Levi.
Jalen and Michael, they've both played some really good minutes this year. A lot of promise from both of them. Super athleticism. And Michael is physical, man. Yeah. And I kind of like the audacity that he plays with. We talked about the dunk that he went up for against Fordham last night. Yeah. And got blocked pretty emphatically. But I like to see, that kind of audacity from a big, wanting to go up for that dunk and wanting to posterize someone and make a momentum play. I don't know. I'm very excited from the contributions that I've seen from those two this year. I think they have an awesome future ahead of them.
Yeah. You mentioned his sort of audacity. I got to throw in too, like, I think definitely would be maybe one of the first plays on this highlight reel from this year was when he was forced to play at the 5 late in the game at Davidson. Because of foul trouble, and he blocked Luka Brockovich's late 3 there in a close game to help VCU hold on that game, which was
maybe a game-winning play.
Yeah, 100%, which is still like one of their biggest wins of the season, arguably the single biggest win of the season at this point. So can
he shoot it? By the way, Mike, he hit a 3 last night. He banked it in for Tom McKee. I don't think he called bank, but it made me wonder, is that a part of his game that he's trying to develop to be able to stretch it out a little more and shoot from the perimeter?
I haven't got a chance to interview him about that, but I'm sure it has. I don't know. He's made like 2 or 3 threes total this year. I have a stat for you.
It was open and he went for it, and so it certainly made me wonder if maybe that's part of his game that he's trying to develop.
It's 3 of 11 from 3 this year, so he hasn't attempted a lot, but he's definitely made a couple.
But with how many guys we rotate down low, I imagine that's a decent. He'll obviously shoot it when he's open. So it seems like that's something that he feels like it can grow in his game, and he can be a big that can stretch the floor a little bit. So that'd be awesome to see from him if he can perfect that and become a more consistent shooter. Yeah, because he's super physical.
Oh, yeah, so physical. He's a great player. One thing we want to touch on, just help preview this Friday game, a little bit of over/under, a little segment there. So
we'll both be there. By the way, obviously you're always there and covering. I'll be there as a fan.
So one category I want to hit on is 10 Richmond turnovers over/under. That obviously again mentioning Richmond take care of the ball very well. They've been averaging just about 9.8 turnovers per game in the A10 play. So over/under, I want to say over, but
at the Siegel Center.
Yeah, slightly. Go back to the previous Richmond game. They had 13 turnovers in that previous VCU Richmond game in January. So I'm gonna say slightly over and run that range on Friday.
I would agree with that. I mean, that's obviously so huge with the Siegel Center. If you get the crowd behind you and if you start playing not only just momentum plays, but momentum plays specific to the VCU brand. So when you create a turnover, you get a transition bucket, man, the stew gets loud. You can't overstate how important that is for the flow of a game, particularly a game against Richmond, where the animosity will be turned up a little bit in the stew. And so when you start getting Gilliard taking care of the ball will be huge, obviously. And if VCU can get over that turnover number, you'd think that they have a great chance to win the ball game.
Yeah, 100%. Now on the flip side, 15 VCU turnovers. Like VCU struggle with turnovers at times. Yeah. It hasn't hurt them as much recently, but they still had some high turnover numbers recently. They've been averaging about 14 or so per game to this point. I'm gonna say just keeping with the trend. They had 17 last night against Fordham, 12 in the first half. I'm gonna say over, maybe about 18 or 19 turnovers. But as they've shown, they can still win even with turning the ball over.
I'm going to say over 2 because I think that VCU, not that they're okay with turning the ball over a lot, you obviously never are, but with the brand of basketball that you want to play, you want a frenetic pace,
Yeah.
you want a fast pace, and sometimes you're going to turn the ball over when you do that. And like we talked about earlier, you've got to be aware of the negative externalities of the style that you want to play.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when you want to play fast and you want to get up and down the floor, you're going to turn the ball over. Sometimes you're going to get into foul trouble.
Yeah.
Maybe you get teed up sometimes. That kind of comes with the territory of playing the style that you want to play if you're VCU.
Exactly.
So I think that we see maybe a faster paced frenetic game where the turnover numbers get up for both teams, and that would suit VCU.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Now the over-under, I had VCU 50% shooting for the game. I think I first wrote that note coming off the Jordan Mason game, which was, again, probably their best offensive showing. So that's not taking into account that second half last night. But,
I don't want to know what the numbers were for the second half last night.
Because of how crazy that first half was, they still finished at exactly 50% from the field last night, even with the awful second half. So I'm going to say under just because Richmond is also pretty solid defensively. So nothing crazy, but I think maybe mid-40s is more realistic tomorrow night.
I'm going to say under 2 because of the presumed absence of Hason. You lose some of that efficiency down low. I don't know what his numbers shooting in the paint are this year, but I imagine that they're very good with his length, with his ability to get easy baskets, and for VCU to be able to play inside out through him. Yeah. You would think that they get less entry passes. There's less touches on the block with him out of the game, and that probably hurts your offensive efficiency. So I'm going to go under as well.
Yeah. One last one, 8 Richmond three-pointers. They're averaging almost 9 three-pointers a game. They had, but VCU over the years has defended Richmond on the perimeter pretty well, and that continued in that January 29th game where Richmond was 4-2 from deep in that first matchup. So I'm going to say...
wow, were they 4 of 22?
Yeah,
wow.
So I'm going to say under 8 three-pointers for Richmond on Friday if VCU continues to play a strong three-point defense that they've shown this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to say under as well. It's been VCU's defensive backbone this year. We talked about the spurt ability and being able to keep teams from getting on those long runs. If Richmond can hit a few threes back-to-back and do that, then they could be in the driver's seat in that game. But you got to expect VCU. That's their calling card. Right? So it feels blasphemous to say over on that number, even though Richmond's a good three-point shooting team, so they're certainly capable of it. Yeah. But you would think that at the Siegel Center. And I love watching VCU's mentality with closing out to three-point shooters, and that seems like that's a huge part of it. It's something that you've written about before on the philosophy that Rhodes teaches. Fly out. Like, don't fly past him so you don't foul, but like if a shooter pump fakes and gets you to fly past him and then hits, then you tip your cap. And you say that's a great offensive play. But usually when you get players out of their rhythm and you fly out to those shooters, then they feel like, now I have to drive, and then you've got all of that length inside to be able to contest shots, and you get players into awkward situations where they're maybe not taking the shot that they had initially envisioned. And so that philosophy with flying out to a three-point shooter and running people off the line is huge for VCU. It's been great this year, and you would think that against a Richmond team that somewhat hangs their hat on being able to hit threes, that if VCU can limit them on the perimeter, then they should be in the driver's seat at the Siegel Center.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, that was something Rose said here recently, was that, as he termed it, a late contest is better than no contest. They view a no contest as unacceptable. You probably get put off the floor.
You have too much length for that, too. With how much length VCU has, you should be contesting everything in the perimeter.
Exactly. So not contesting a three will probably be sending you on the bench for a little bit. So
you got the depth to do it, too, right? You got that many players. It's like Rhodes can pull that card when he wants. It says, hey, I've got someone else who's ready to get these minutes. And so if you're not flying out, then you are going to sit for a while. And so you see kind of some desperation defensively with flying out to three-point shooters, and that's part of why VCU is so good at defending it.
Exactly. So, I'm looking forward to it. BC Richmond can't beat it, whether it's at Robinson or whether it's at Siegel Center. So on Friday night, showcase game, I know it's gonna be rocking at Siegel Center. So I'm looking forward to covering that one.
Best environments I've ever seen, Texas and LSU. I think at the Siegel Center come to mind, but the Richmond game is always up there. It never disappoints, and it's going to be an awesome atmosphere at the Stew on Friday.
Yeah, agreed. So you can find this at richmond.com, wherever you get your podcast, and we'll have our print coverage. I was in a print edition, and also richmond.com moving forward. So make sure to follow us there for all the breakdown of the Richmond game from myself, my colleagues John O'Connor and David Teal will we'll be triple staffing that one on Friday, so it'll be fun.
The dream team.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to working with those guys again. So looking forward to the game, and thank you for listening and watching.
Thank you guys.